Hi everyone and welcome back to another Elite 11 Team Reveal with me, Tom Campbell, on the fantasyfootballfix.com YouTube channel. This week we've got Andrew Neve and we are previewing Game Week 22 for what feels like the 40th time, guys, but we're not going to look back to Game Week 21. We're going to be looking ahead. We're going to be talking around forward options ahead of Game Week 22. We're going to be taking a look at the upcoming blank and double game weeks. So strap in, enjoy the ride, and let's get right into it. Guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Andrew Neve. We haven't spoken, Andrew, since probably the before Christmas was the last time we spoke. So welcome back, my friend. And how has your season been going?
Oh, very good, Tom. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, it's been all right. It's been, I've had a slightly better time, I think, since we last spoke. I think every time I seem to have these chats with you, I've come off a horrendous game week. So it's quite nice having a bit of a green arrow and a nice, hefty enough green arrow for the last game week. And I can finally come on with a smile on my face. So quite happy, thank you.
Honest, this is great. This is trending in the right direction, right? The last few videos I've had in 2024 have all featured happy Elite 11 Team Reveal managers, which is a new thing to me and to the channel from 2023. So long may it continue, and I'm glad things are working out. Guys, I should say, of course, timestamps are on the video. We've got lots and lots to jump around on this video because we've got so many thoughts ahead of Game Week 22. And Andrew and I were just saying in the talk before the video is that it feels like Game Week 21 has been never ending, doesn't it? Goodness me. We're not going to look back though, Andrew. We're going to be looking ahead. But just sum up how the season's kind of been going for you recently. You've mentioned a bit of an upswing there. Has there been anything that you've been doing differently or anything that you kind of would reflect on in terms of how things have changed since the beginning part of the season?
The upswing's been slow. I'm still a long way off where I'd like to be at this stage. I think if I was at about the 250, 300 mark right now, I'd be quite happy and quite confident that I can try and chase down that top 10K, but still kind of hovering just outside the 500,000 mark at the moment. But considering it wasn't very long ago that I wasn't even the top million, it's kind of gone the right way. I think last week we'll have a quick look at, obviously, but things finally came through with the double Arsenal clean sheets, going Cole Palmer, and the captaincy worked out as opposed to going Saka. So few things went my way. I think just having this, I've really enjoyed this break throughout January. I know it's a bit boring for most FPL managers, but just given how hard things were in that first half of the season, I've quite enjoyed just having that time off. I had a little bit of time to put things into perspective before this Game Week 21 and think about my transfers. It feels as if I'm finally in a place where I can kind of look forward and be proactive as opposed to reactive and just reacting to what's happened in the past. So quite excited about the second half of the season, and hopefully that sort of trend continues.
Yeah, I remember the last time we spoke, Andrew, and you talked around your reflections on the first part of the season was that you weren't able to deploy your kind of typical strategic thinking because it always felt like you were having to react to, the latest fire to put out. So maybe that's the thing now, and actually you're going to have the chance to flex that kind of FPL muscle, I guess, and try and plan your strategy. And we're going to be talking around, guys, some fixture changes in terms of the upcoming schedule, in terms of blanks and doubles that will be part of the fun of being an FPL manager, right? You've got lots of chips remaining and the points are so close right now, Andrew, aren't they, as well, in terms of, you're ranked just outside 500k at the moment, but it wouldn't take much for you to be sort of halving that rank, would it, in just a couple of game weeks?
No, absolutely. If I'd gone Jota, for example, instead of Richarlison last week, I'd probably be around the 300,000 mark, given, his points. So it literally just takes that one big call to have you jump up.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what we're going to see how you're planning to orchestrate that. So we're not going to look back, guys, to Game Week 21 because it's already pretty far in the rearview mirror. I think Andrew mentioned to me off camera that it was over 2.5 weeks ago that the Game Week started. So we're going to be looking ahead in terms of how Andrew's setting up his bus team ahead of Game Week 22. Okay, so my eyes are immediately here drawn, Andrew, to that lovely different colour jersey in the back line there of Mr. Bell in the back. So we'll talk about him in just a few moments. But you mentioned this double Arsenal defence obviously came through handsomely for you in 21. Let's go ahead and assume that Gabriel's going to be fit. Is this something that you think will continue for you further down the stretch, the doubling up in the defensive setup and foregoing the opportunity to have more Arsenal attacking options later on in the season?
It looks to be that way. I think unless I decide to bring in Trent Alexander-Arnold, one of them might need to make way, just given the funds. But I think I'm likely, at least for the next 5 or 6 game weeks, to stick with that double Arsenal defence. The defensive numbers are the best in the season so far, so it makes sense for me to do so. And I think it's also just a lack of other options. I've got Bell at the back there, as you can see. Obviously not ideal. He's stuck there because I got him in, must have been game week 4, game week 5, and I had a stretch of 9 game weeks where I couldn't make any transfers that I wanted to make because I had so many injuries in the side. So he's stuck there. He's a bit of a legacy pick, unfortunately. But the plan was always to bring Haaland in this week if he was fit. I think if Haaland had got any minutes in the cup game on the weekend, if he'd been on the bench, he would have come in for me this week. I don't think he's going to come in for me this week now, unfortunately, just given the fact that we don't know whether he's going to start, whether he's going to just be on the bench for this game against Burnley.
Mm-hmm.
So Bell is someone that I can get rid of.
Yeah.
It might not actually be Bell. It'll probably end up being Lascelles, just because obviously Bell is at least a starting player.
They've not been too bad, right?
Isn't.
I mean, recently as well, especially they've been quite impressive.
No, true. They've been fairly tight, and I don't mind starting him this week at home. I think I do need to make defensive transfers, but I'm pretty certain I'm going to be keeping that extra transfer in the bank this week.
Okay.
I think the benefits I can get from saving a transfer over this next batch of 4, 5, 6 game weeks leading up to the double in 25 and the blank in 26.
Yeah.
The information I can get by holding on to 2 transfers going forward and having 2 transfers as much as I can over the next 3 or 4 game weeks leading up to 25. I think that benefits far better than just getting a defender in this week and not having Bell start, for example. So not ideal, obviously, but I think having the extra transfer is better.
I hear you. And it's so interesting because it's very, very rare. In fact, I can't remember a time in any of the videos I've done over the last couple of seasons whereby I've had the opportunity to talk to multiple elite managers about the same upcoming game week, because the game week's been running for so long. So actually, if we cast our mind back to Mark's thoughts ahead of game week 22 last weekend, he was arriving at the same conclusion in terms of the prospective opportunity to hold and stockpile those transfers to be able to react with more knowledge further on as we approach double and blank game week season. So interesting to see your thoughts aligning there. Let's move further forward into the more offensive positions. I'm not going to talk around goalkeeper today, Andrew, but I'm really intrigued. You've got £10 million in the bank. This is an extraordinary time in FPL, right? Obviously that will have been from Haaland and Salah being jettisoned, understandably. Let's talk about Saka, though. There's been some thoughts, I guess, in people's discussions in the FPL wider community around his role in our sides. Obviously, not a bad fixture away at Nottingham Forest. What are your thoughts about them as an offensive unit? Obviously, they looked more impressive in their last game against Palace, and for Saka in particular. What are your thoughts for FPL managers in relation to Saka?
Yeah, I think those that had him and those that captained him last week, and there would have been a lot of them, were very unlucky. 5 goals against Palace and no returns, and what should have been a return, it turns out. It's a tough one. I think Saka's stats are still very good. He's 3rd for non-penalty XGI at the moment amongst midfielders. He has the problem that he has is that he's missed a lot of big chances. He's missed 4 out of his last 5 big chances.
Wow.
And has created a lot of chances too, and they just haven't been converted. 16 of them, I believe. So I think I'm going to be holding tight for the next few weeks, but he is someone that could make way for a Jota, for a KDB, one of those double game weekers, just depending on what information comes out. We obviously all just need to hold on and see what information we get about Salah too, and whether he's going to be back for game week 25 from hamstring injury. So I think we don't need to panic with Saka. The fixtures are still decent enough. He has that game week or that game in the blank game week 26.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to be rushing to sell him, but I don't see any problem with him making way for other midfielders that perhaps have that double game week and a little bit more exciting for you.
Yeah, I see. Interesting. And obviously with that huge slush fund, I guess you're not necessarily looking to accrue more funds anytime soon. We are going to talk, guys, at length about forwards in this video, so we'll move on and tackle those that discussion in a section of other slides in a few moments. So let's talk around Man City briefly, and that might touch on, I guess, the forward quandary there. You're sitting here with Phil Foden and Alvarez in the team. Alvarez is captain, I see, ahead of game week 22 as well, Andrew. How are you seeing this Man City quandary with the upcoming double game week? I mean, is it all just completely reliant on the Haaland news? And I guess secondary question: how would you react? I guess if Haaland was, say, got a setback and was not going to be playing in that game, though we don't expect that to be the case. But I'm just interested as to how you see that third option. Would you find room for Kevin De Bruyne and go all out and offensive, or would you be looking to find a defensive option in there for Man City?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you aren't getting Haaland and then De Bruyne, it does make sense. Just because you've got the money and you might as well spend it, and it means there's one less City attacker that you're having to worry about. The thing with City is the benefits are there because of the double game week. They've obviously got that extra game. They play in the blank in 26. They've got some great fixtures too. Every one of them comes with a bit of a there's risk to each and every single one of them.
Real pros
Obviously,
and
Haaland
cons,
just
isn't it?
coming back.
Real pros and cons, yeah.
Haaland just coming back from injury now. Foden, Alvarez, and KDB. Those are the guys that you're obviously going to be looking at for the attacking options for Man City going forward. I think with KDB, in the next 6 game weeks, he probably starts 3, maybe 4 at best.
Okay.
We obviously all know what he can do coming off the bench, but you obviously want him playing as many minutes as he possibly can. I think he's only played, 45 minutes of Premier League football this whole season. Champions League starts again in 2 weeks' time. You would think that De Bruyne is going to have a big say and play a big part in them trying to defend their trophy in Europe.
Sure.
I think we also got to remember Alvarez hasn't been preferred in Europe this season. Yeah. He's just, funnily enough, just been exclusively Premier League and just hasn't seemed to start in Europe at all. So if that stays the same, then you would assume that KDB gets less minutes. But obviously, the upside with Kevin De Bruyne is just so much better than the likes of Alvarez and Foden, I think. So it's really just how risk averse you are as a manager and what the rest of your team looks like.
Interesting. And you mentioned how few minutes that Kevin De Bruyne has spent on the pitch from a Premier League perspective this season. Do you see the dynamic and indeed the minutes threat for Alvarez being a problem for owners? I mean, I'm sitting here as a Alvarez owner. You've got the captain's armband on him ahead of game week 22 at the moment. But I guess my question is, because we haven't seen how that interaction is expected to work this season because of De Bruyne's injury, how do you see that shaking out? Do you think that Guardiola is going to find a place for both of them in his starting lineup typically? Is that how you'd see that would play out?
It's naturally a big worry. Alvarez was the player that made way for Kevin De Bruyne when he came on the weekend off the bench. Mm-hmm. So, I saw that and naturally thought, oh dear, he's going to be getting less minutes. And unfortunately, the more quality players you got in your squad, the less minutes each one of them are going to play. Sure. If I remember correctly, that first game of the season for Man City, it was also against Burnley. Actually, all 4 of them did start together. So Haaland, De Bruyne, Foden, Alvarez, they all started that game, if I remember correctly. So it may very well have no impact in terms of a start in certain games, but you would think over the course of the next 5 or 6, which is really what we should be focusing on as FPL managers now, that block of 5 or 6 games between now in game week 26 because of that double that we have in 25 and the blank that we have in 26. There's still so many permutations, so many things that can change with regards to the blanks in 29, which is just another reason why I think hanging on to that second free transfer is going to help so much. It means I can see how Man City go about playing against Burnley, who comes on, what that dynamic might be. And it means that I can either just bring in Haaland in 23. Yeah. I will, however, need to make a choice then as to whether Haaland comes in for one of the other forwards. I've currently got Solanke and Watkins. Or if I want Kevin De Bruyne, then he's going to be coming in for Alvarez because obviously I'm limited to the 3 City players. So there's a big call for me to make in 23, and I'd like 2 free transfers going into that week.
Love it.
And as much information as I can get.
It's going to be so helpful, I'm sure, to so many people watching the video, Andrew, that's your kind of chosen route around almost, I guess, accepting the opportunity cost that Kevin De Bruyne may do some damage, right, in the Burnley game in 22, every chance, even if it's off the bench, but then to actually respond to that with 2 free transfers ahead of 23 and select the trio that you'll be most comfortable with for 23, and I'm going to find that really interesting, and I'm sure other managers will be in the same position. Yeah. I've got to ask you, the captaincy, is that I mean, we're not far away from game week 22 starting, Andrew. Any chance of that being changed, or is that you're gonna stay strong there?
Yeah, that may very well change. It's not set in stone by any means. I think it's either going to be Alvarez, Foden, or Richarlison's actually one that's tempted me the most right now. If I have a look at the last 6 game weeks for him, he's only blanked once in the last 6 goals in the last 6 games, I think it is. Yeah. So if you're looking purely at form, he's also playing, I think, at home to Brentford.
Yes, that's right.
Brentford just can't keep a clean sheet. I think they last kept a clean sheet in game week 10. I own Flecken, and my God, I can't wait to get rid of him. Why would you have Brentford defence at the moment? And if you think about it logically, Richarlison playing at home against a team who you expect Spurs to score 2 or 3 against at least, he becomes very, very tempting. I think my initial thought was just go with the Man City player, because that's the game where you expect the most goals. You expect a good 4, maybe even 5 goals from Man City in that game. But considering Spurs probably a goal or 2 less, but the likelihood of a certain player being involved in those goals more, he is tempting me a lot, and I wouldn't be too surprised if I make that switch before Tuesday's deadline.
We'll watch out, and we'll look for the push notifications as well over on fantasyfootballfix.com to see those thoughts as they crystallise before game week 22. Andrew, I did see a really interesting discussion on our Slack channel around Brentford defence, who don't seem to be performing horrifically defensively, but they give up one error-laden chance, I guess, or emanating from a defensive error per chance, which is invariably, I should say, leading to a goal conceded, which is all that matters from a defensive perspective. I guess that's going to be a key sentence I'm going to take into future game weeks when we think we get tempted by the upcoming double game week. Remember, guys, Andrew Neve asked the question, why would you want Brentford defence? So bear that in mind as we approach the upcoming doubles. All right, we're going to move on, mate. I'm not going to ask you about Heung-min Son. Instead, we're going to move on, and we're going to start taking a look around the forward quandary that faces us ahead of Game Week 22. Oh, okay. My bad. We're coming to the forwards in a few moments, guys. Actually, I remember we changed the running order, so apologies for that. We will come to that in due course, of course, guys. But we do actually want to talk around some fixture difficulties that we're going to have to respond to as FPL managers as well. And this is a revisit of a slide that we presented last week with Mark. But we think it's still really pertinent, and probably actually more so now that we're starting to get more of a handle on the upcoming fixtures as a result of the FA Cup playing out over the weekend. So, Andrew, we're highlighting here game weeks 24 through to the end of the season. Obviously, lots more information will become available to us as and when these fixtures get clarified. What are your thoughts ahead of, I guess, game week 25 and 26? Let's take that as our first checkpoint as people get excited around the first upcoming double in 25.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking at, like I said, the block of next 5 game weeks as a sort of separate little mini season in itself. I mentioned on my notes on the website this past week that it's chip season, and this is kind of where those elite managers and those players who take the game seriously uh, define their season. It's where they can make those massive gains. And the biggest difference between the elite managers and those who perhaps don't do quite as well is the level of planning and preparation that goes into this part of the season because of those difficult to navigate game weeks with all the doubles and blanks that we have. Obviously, the ideal thing here is to attack that double game week and game week 25, have as many players as you can to maximize your chances of big gains, big points in that game week. But you need to look at it as a whole. And that's why I mentioned a block of sort of 5 game weeks, which includes the double in game week 26. And the reason why we need to talk about certain forwards having a look at these next few game weeks, because it's not obviously just about going and attacking those people with tunnel vision that have a double game week. And we also need to think about the players that you're obviously getting rid of and the fact that whether they have a double game week, are they one of those teams that perhaps don't play in game week 26? So 25th of Feb, EFL Cup final, Chelsea play Liverpool that week. So that fixture, I don't think has officially been moved yet, the Liverpool one, but it's very, very likely going to be in that game week 25. I think 95% according to Ben Crellin on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So what we obviously should be doing is having a look at maximizing within reason the amount of Man City players that we've got playing a double then, because they also play in 26, and of course the Liverpool players. Just remembering that Liverpool obviously don't play in game week 26 though.
Yeah, I see. And let's talk to a bigger picture a moment here. So obviously with the news that Jurgen Klopp announced his upcoming exit from Liverpool this week, between when I spoke to Mark last week and we're speaking today, I wondered from a kind of humanistic perspective, do you think that that's going to galvanise them and see them really push for the league? I mean, they're already leading the Premier League charge, right? And do you think that that leads us to be more favour bringing in Liverpool players ASAP, or is this still they were top already, Tom? What are we thinking? They're already great options. I just wondered how you kind of respond to that type of external news that wouldn't necessarily quickly impact the stats.
It wouldn't impact things for me too much. I don't think it changes too much for Liverpool. They're fantastic assets to go for regardless. The big thing about Liverpool at the moment is obviously the fitness of Mo Salah.
Yeah.
I think it was on the 21st, his agent mentioned him being out for 3 or 4 weeks.
That was the first diagnosis, that's right.
Which again is why I want to save that free transfer and roll that as much as I can the closer I get to game week 25, because I'll need to make a choice in game week 24 or 25 as to whether Mo Salah comes into the team. If he's playing a double in 25 against, I think it's Brentford and Luton, I'm going to want him playing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
The problem, though, is that initial diagnosis hits slap bang in the middle of that game week 25.
Yeah.
And we need to remember, obviously, that second game in game week 25 is midweek before they play a final in game week 26. So even if he is back slap bang in the middle of game week 25, and he would only be one game that he's playing, and how much of that game would he play given the fact that they've got a final that following weekend on the 25th of Feb. So it's a tough one with Mo. At the moment, I'm kind of in the back of my planning not to have him, but what I'm trying to do is perhaps have a route to him if for any reason the next 2 or 3 weeks we get word that it looks like he might be available for that double in 25.
Yeah, great thoughts, and obviously we'll need to stay as close to the information, the trusted and reliable and verified information as we get closer to 24, 25. And that does seem to be the theme of your advice so far, Andrew, around trying to accrue those 2 free transfers and then roll them for as long as you possibly can ahead of the the juicier double game week in 25 and the blank in 26. Do you think that would give you pause? Let's think about chip strategy a little bit here. A lot of folks will have their triple captaincy chip still in the back pocket, and they may be tempted with that double that you mentioned in 25. Would that give you pause in terms of potentially using that? I mean, it sounds like a juicy opportunity, but it might not present itself because of the final for Liverpool in 26.
Yeah, exactly. Mo Salah would, if fit, would definitely be an option for that triple captaincy. I think it's more likely to go to Haaland in that game week if we do end up using it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good week to use the triple captaincy if you've still got all of your chips available. It probably makes the most sense. There's obviously a double coming up in 34 and 37. We don't quite know what teams will double then. And we're probably looking at saving free hits, wild cards, bench boosts. It probably makes a little bit more sense for that back end of the season. So I think I am more likely going to play that triple captaincy in game week 25.
Yeah, makes sense.
Unless anything changes. And I think the only thing really that could change for me, that would change my chip strategy going into 25 and 26, is where that Spurs-Chelsea game gets moved.
Okay.
Because Chelsea play the final in game week 26, the game between them and Spurs will move. We don't yet know where it moves. They don't have the same kind of congestion in the back end of the season that some of the other teams do. So there's no real urgency in terms of getting that slotted in anywhere. So it makes sense for them for that game week to happen, any time between 26 and the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
There is, however, a small possibility that it could still move to game week 25.
Okay.
I think the only reason for that really is a case of fairness. I believe it could go there because Liverpool are playing midweek before the final in game week 25. And you would imagine Klopp and Liverpool having a bit to say if they end up losing that final, and Chelsea had that week off to prepare, and Liverpool will obviously playing 3 days before the final.
Well, we'll see.
So there is that possibility. It's a small possibility. I don't think it'll happen personally.
Mm-hmm.
And if it does, you would assume that would get announced this week, just simply because of the fact that it's only about 3 weeks away.
Yeah.
So, and again, just another reason why I'm keeping that second transfer in the back pocket, because there's just more information that could come out in the next week. I think that's the only way that I might be going, okay, if there is a double for Chelsea and for Spurs in 25, then I'm probably going to need a free hit in there, whether that's for 25 or for 26. I'm not 100% sure yet. I'll have a look at that when I know where that fixture lands.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's going to land there, I'm more than likely to navigate those 2 game weeks without a chip, which just means 1 or 2 small sacrifices for 25 with Liverpool players, just because I'd like, obviously, a strong enough team to field in game week 26.
You say without a chip, but potentially still the triple captaincy still could be an option, a viable option.
Sorry, sorry, without the free hit chip.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Just on the triple captaincy there as well, Andrew, pretty long lens now, but let's say, for example, just purely hypothetical now, if Mo Salah wasn't a viable option for whatever reason in terms of the injury being a little bit more significant, and Haaland, let's say, has set back from his recovery, etc., anybody else leaping out to you there? Would you still be thinking, actually, strategically, this is the best opportunity in terms of it being a double that we know about? It's still a time of the season where we can be confident that teams are going to play their star players week in, week out, whilst they're still competing for these big prizes. Anybody else that you'd be thinking would be a great option? Obviously, De Bruyne hasn't played a lot of football, as you mentioned. Is there anyone else that would tempt you?
No one from Man City, I think, just because I wouldn't know about the expected minutes for them. That would just scare me a little bit too much.
Sure.
And having 2 games within a week, what's the likelihood of someone like De Bruyne starting both of those games? I think if I were to use the triple captaincy on anyone else besides Haaland in game week 25 and Salah wasn't available, it would go to a Liverpool player, whether that was Jota or Darwin. again, just depends on how risk averse you are. But both of those players do definitely need looking at and mentioning, just because it's scary not having them, to be perfectly honest. I don't have either at the moment myself. I am looking at bringing probably just one of them in for that double game week. Whether that's Darwin or Jota, I don't know yet.
No.
I'm going to give it the next 2 game weeks to kind of decide on whether they should come in. I think their next 2 are, is it Arsenal and Chelsea? I think. I can't remember. They were tougher
they're
games.
difficult games.
For,
I think it is Arsenal next. Yeah.
In the next 2. So again, I don't feel like I need to rush to bring one of them in. But game week 24, they do play Burnley, and then they go into that double.
Yeah.
So by game week 24, I think I'll have a good idea of whether I think Salah will be back in, and know whether it's going to be Darwin or Jota that comes in for me.
Love it. Trent Alexander-Arnold's name didn't get mentioned, so I'm not gonna poke the hornet's nest there and ask about him, but just wondering whether or not he may enter thoughts if he starts to get back into selection anytime soon as well.
Yeah, he's definitely in consideration, especially considering how bad my backline looks at the moment. The only reason why I didn't mention him there really is because the way I've kind of planned it out, and making sure that I've got a good enough team to get out in that blank game in 26 without using a free hit chip. I need to limit myself just with regards to the amount of Liverpool players I bring in, because I'll already be tripled up with Man City players, and I will have 1 or 2 players on the bench that don't play in that game in 26. And I don't want to get rid of the likes of Cole Palmer, for example, just to bring in another player. There's obviously a lot of money tied up in Cole Palmer now, given how much he's risen over the last, half of the season. So it's the only reason why Trent hasn't been mentioned. And I think I'm probably just likely to attack the attackers as opposed to the defender.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I've spoken to Corey, I've spoken to Craig and Mark as well, and they've all said similar in relation to the prospect of using a triple captaincy chip on what is still a defender, an offensive one, but is still a defender. We want to talk about attackers. I've been threatening this for a while now. There's a forward here who, guys, we wanted to highlight in terms of how his performance seems to have slipped over the last several game weeks. So let's take a look at the forward options ahead of game week 22. Okay, so it will probably strike you as no surprise, guys, that we're referring here to Ollie Watkins. And on this slide here, you can see how well he performed, I guess, in game weeks 1 through 15. Really impressive, and would have been in a lot of our teams, and will remain in our teams, I'm sure, in a lot of managers' cases. But look at that drop-off, Andrew, through game weeks 16 through 21. These are stats per 90 that you can pick up from fantasyfootballfix.com. But he's a lot of money, I guess, in compared to the cohort of forwards that you can pick from. Is he a cash cow that we should be looking to move on right about now, Andrew? Or are you still comfortable holding? What are your thoughts on Ollie Watkins before we look broad brush at the other forward options?
Yeah, really difficult option. The reason why I thought it'd be good to have a little chat about Ollie is because we will be looking at other forwards, given the fact that we've got a double game week in 25 coming up, and we've got the likes of Darwin and Ivan Toney ready and waiting to play possibly 2 games, 3 games for someone like Ivan Toney over those 2 game weeks. So Ollie Watkins is someone who is obviously very, very streaky. I did a little bit of looking into his numbers earlier on in the week, and chatted to my brother-in-law, actually, who's massive Aston Villa fan and a football coach himself, just to get an idea of what he thinks as to what is going on with him. And he said exactly the same thing. He's a very, very streaky player, and he's never seen him as an out-and-out striker. He's a bit more of a sort of workhorse. He needs a lot of chances in order to get those goals. So what I kind of took with that information is I wanted to find out whether it was Aston Villa as a team, whether those chances have just dried up, and that's the reason why he's only got 3 returns in the last 7 game weeks, I think it is, a goal and 2 assists, and those 2 assists came in the same game against Burnley. So I think our stats on on the screen here for the last 6 games. You can actually go back another game week because it was game week 14 that he last had a nice haul. So Aston Villa as a whole, I just kind of had a look at their creativity. There's obviously a great tool on the websites, having a look at the stats for each one of those. And having a look at the first 14 game weeks compared with the first 14 game weeks compared to the last 7 game weeks. And Aston Villa's attempted assists haven't really changed much. 11.43 in the first 14 game weeks, 11.14.
Okay.
This is an average per game week. Their crosses, very, very similar. The big chances created, just over an average of 2 in the first 14 game weeks, just below an average of 2 for the next 7.
Pretty similar.
So as a team, you have a look at that data, and as a team, you can only really conclude that things haven't really changed that much. Tielemans has been out. He is back in now. You would assume that would, bring a little bit more creativity to the team, so only benefit him, I'm sure. But it's the big chances, unfortunately, that seem to be drying up. So for Watkins himself, he's got his shots in the box. None of that's really changed a whole lot for him, but the big chances, he has gone from an average of just below 1 big chance per game.
It's good.
To 0.14.
Gosh, terrible.
So it's fallen off a cliff, basically.
A big chance every 10 games.
7 game weeks.
Gosh, that's dreadful, isn't it? Really bad.
Which obviously means that his XG has fallen off a cliff. His XG in those first 14 game weeks was almost 0.6, is now 0.21. So it's a third of what he had in those first 14 game weeks. So I think the only thing I can really conclude for that is that the team as a whole haven't really changed in terms of the crosses that they get in the box, the chances that they're creating. He perhaps just isn't getting in the same kind of positions that he was in before. And, whether that's because he's been asked to do something slightly differently in the last few game weeks, perhaps with Tielemans out. Funnily enough, his assist potential seems to have increased a little bit more in those last 7 game weeks. But, it's obviously the goals that we're looking at getting from him. So he's definitely someone that is on the chopping block.
Yeah.
And I'm going to see whether I can hang on to him for these next few game weeks, just simply because of the fixtures that Aston Villa have got coming up. They play Newcastle at home this week, but then they've got Sheffield, Fulham, Forest and Luton in their next 5, with Man United at home thrown in there in game week 24.
Not a fixture to be frightened of.
Not at all, exactly. So with Sheffield United, Man United, Fulham, Forest and Luton in the next 5 or 6 game weeks, you'd expect there to be plenty of chances for him there. It's just about whether getting rid of him for a Ivan Toney or perhaps a Darwin for that double game week in 25 makes a little bit more sense for you. The reason why I think I might try hang on to him is just simply because of that. Going into game week 26, if I do go for a Darwin or a Ivan Toney, for example, my team is not going to look quite as strong in game week 26 without using a chip. And I'd quite like to see him at home against Nottingham Forest in my team for game week 26, as opposed to having a Darwin who blanks, for example, in that game week. But we'll obviously have a look at the forward options. So, it's spin it however way you want. And that is the trouble that we have at the moment. There's so many different narratives that play out. There's so many different ways that you could look at things right now, that there's that cliche of team dependency comes in right now, and there isn't one definitive answer.
No, there's not. But look, that's a fascinating deep dive insight into Watkins and Villa as a collective, Andrew. So thank you for pulling those stats for us. And I mean, the big chance one to me presents a really compelling case to potentially look to move them on. Let's say, for example, if Haaland is declared fit by Guardiola ahead of 22, then it would be a straightforward move, right? Because he would be probably the most expensive option in most people's front line right now, I would venture. So it'll be interesting to see what those ownership statistics look like as we move through the next several game weeks. Look, you've mentioned some other forward options as well, Andrew. So we've pulled out some statistics on some other forward or striking options that people might want to consider ahead of Game Week 22. Okay, guys, so you'll notice here that we've included some of the folks that are already in Andrew's team here. We've pulled out some statistics in terms of stats per 90, games, goals, FPL assists and XGI respectively, and also pulled across some fixture difficulty rankings, which you can pick up on fantasyfootballfix.com as well, for Bournemouth, Liverpool, Man City and Brentford respectively. Obviously, Ivan Toney back into the team, back into the goal straight away, back into the controversy as well, Andrew, which was quite amusing to me straight away. There's lots of column inches on Ivan Toney. But what's jumping out to you here, right, Andrew? Let's say if you had a wild card situation, I got to ask you, front three, how would that be looking for you, bearing in mind what we're looking at on screen at the moment?
It's a tough question, to be perfectly honest. I think it kind of boils down to whether I keep Alvarez or not, probably. Mm-hmm. I think because of that double in 25 and obviously wanting to attack it with Triple City, having Alvarez and Haaland is obviously an option, mm-hmm. and just going for one of the Man City defenders, Man City midfielders or defender, if you're so inclined. So it really depends on whether I want to keep Alvarez. For my team at the moment, and again, this is why I am keeping that second transfer in the back. Sure. So I've got another week to make that decision. But I am next week going to have to decide whether Alvarez makes way for Haaland so that KDB can come in, or whether Haaland just joins Alvarez up top. I think having a look at those options there, Toney did jump out, obviously, when he scored. Great comeback for him. He's on direct free kicks. He's on penalties. He's got the double. He plays in the blank. I think he also plays in the blank in Game Week 29 too. So he's kind of one of those players that you can put in, forget about him, because you know he's got extra fixtures, and is obviously a proven striker in the Premier League.
Sure is.
The only worry that we have with him, and again, this just comes back to the whole, every player that you get in at the moment comes with a certain amount of risk, regardless of the fact that they don't even have a blank game week. So Toney is one of those that doesn't. But in 23, he plays Man City. 25, he plays Man City again. That's that first game week. That first game in the double game week for him is against Liverpool. I think, obviously the advantage that you have with him is that he is playing in the blank game in 26. I think that game is away at West Ham. So not too bad there.
No, not at all.
But then the next two for him, I think, are Chelsea and Arsenal, if I remember correctly. So the fixtures are almost as bad as it gets for Brentford, just with regards to the next 7 games or so.
Even ahead of that, Andrew, right? Away at Tottenham, who I know play a high defensive line, but they've got Vicario, who's been immense in goal. Right, and away at Wolves, I wouldn't consider that a straightforward fixture. They held Brighton. I mean, it's not a straightforward game. Look, Ivan Toney is going to be on penalties, direct free kicks. He's going to be he's the talisman. He's back. He's clearly chomping at the bit, etc. He's not a bad pick, but goodness me, that fixture run doesn't fill you with confidence, does it?
No, exactly, and it's why someone like Solanke, for example, is on the list here too. More as a consideration to keep as opposed to get in, obviously. I think if you are bringing him forwards now, if you do wildcard, Solanke may not be top of the list just simply because he doesn't have as many fixtures or perhaps as big an upside as some of those other strikers that do have that double coming up. But you need to remember with Bournemouth that, they've got some decent fixtures, West Ham, Forest and Fulham. 26 he plays, but it is against Man City. And then he's got Burnley away. So there's still decent fixtures in there for Bournemouth. And he's not someone that just needs to be discarded because there is a shiny new toy to play with because of that double game week 25.
No, true.
So just food for thought, basically.
Let's talk about Darwin Núñez. I mean, we've talked a lot about him on the show over the course of the last several months, as you'd expect. I've had Captain Chaos. We've heard he's been an absolute nightmare to own. I tell you what, though, it's not a lot of fun watching a Liverpool game if you don't own him, because goodness me, he gets involved, right?
Precisely. It's terrifying not have him. I'm jealous of those who do at the moment. I can't guarantee that I am going to have him in 24, 25, but I will be looking at bringing him in if I decide by then that I prefer him over Jota.
Yeah.
It's terrifying not having him. I think he looks a hell of a lot more sharp. I think as an owner, you would feel a lot more confident of him hitting the back of the net now than you perhaps did for those first 15 game weeks or so when it looked like he couldn't hit a barn door.
Yeah.
So I do like him. I would love for him to be in my side. And, the reason why I say I'm kind of jealous of the guys who do have him, it's that if you do have him now, you don't have that decision to make. You keep him in your side just simply because it doesn't look like Salah's going to be back for at least the next 3 game weeks. His chance of minutes obviously goes up exponentially because of that. So he stays in your team until, you feel that his minutes are under threat because of Salah's return.
And he doesn't cost a fortune either, right? 7.4 million at the time of recording as well. And, we've talked around the Klopp sort of aspect to consider as well, and how well he performed, or certainly the returns against Bournemouth in the last game as well. It will be interesting to see how that plays out. And it's weird, isn't it? They talked about the beginning of the season. Jackson feels like such an afterthought now, right? But that terrible run of form at the beginning of the season was comparable to owning Darwin Núñez as well. But you wouldn't consider the two, you wouldn't have the conversation with the two of them in the same sentence these days. It's not a like-for-like comparison. There's a lot more faith with him more recently, like you say, right? He seems like a viable FPL asset.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's an exciting prospect going forward, and definitely someone I'm going to be considering.
Okay. Look, we've run pretty long on this video, guys, but there's been an awful lot to talk through. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. Andrew, I've got to ask you, I always ask my guests, transfer ahead of the next game week, how's your team looking? Is it going to be as per the slide where we have previewed your team, or are you going to be making one? How's game week 22 going to be set up for you?
I almost certainly banking that transfer. Definitely. I think it was always going to be Haaland in if I felt like Haaland was going to play this game week. I don't think I'm going to have the balls to bring him in, just simply because we didn't see him on the bench during that cup game or any minutes. Had he been on the bench, had he come on for even just a few minutes in that game, probably would have brought him in this week. But because he isn't looking like he will start, obviously I have no idea what Pep's going to do. I think I'm more than likely going to roll. If anything, if there is perhaps news of another injury to a player, for example, it may be Lascelles out to a Brighton defender. Estupiñán's obviously one that kind of makes the most sense there. There was a bit of a change of position for him his last Premier League game, playing at centre back as opposed to out wide. Obviously helped a lot with his baseline bonus, and the fact that they kept a clean sheet meant I think it was 8 points he got last. It looked like he was wide again in the cup game though. So either way, I think a great option. Brighton have got some pretty good fixtures going forward, and like I said, my defence needs a lot of help at the moment.
Needs a bit of tweaking.
It does. But I just think being able to have that free transfer and rolling that as much as I can towards 25, I think there's bigger gains for me to make further down the line than bringing in a defender this week.
Definitely. Hey, if it's good enough for Mark Mansfield and Andrew Neve, guys, I think holding a transfer makes an awful lot of good sense, definitely. And look, we didn't even mention João Pedro, did we? We've got forward comparison on the screen as we wrap up the video, but off a hat-trick on penalties. You've mentioned Brighton's great fixtures. I don't want you to give your opinion on that, but just something to consider at the end of this week's video. Anything final you wanted to say before we wrap things up, Andrew?
No, I think that's it. Hopefully, that's enough sort of food for thought. Unfortunately, if you're coming, you're hoping to get definitive answers on who you should be bringing in and what your chip strategy would be. You're not going to get them. It is obviously different for everyone. And what I would say is just try hang out as long as you can. Information is key, especially now when there are so many different fixtures floating around looking for homes.
Yeah. Sage advice. And what we can definitively say, guys, is that Game Week 21 will never again be spoken about on this channel until next season, of course. Anyway, guys, I hope you have enjoyed the video. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation with Andrew. Do please smash a like on the video on your way out. Do please comment down below if you have any questions or comments for Andrew, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. And we'll be back with you ahead of Game Week 23 next time. Guys, take care. All the best. See you soon. Bye-bye.